In Santa Fe, you get great opportunities. Ralph Lauren came in one time and bought 5 or 6 gold tones from me in one time. I recently sold 5 to Bill Ford, CEO of Ford Motor Company. Jerry Bruckheimer bought a series of them. And you know, it's interesting. These people come to Santa Fe, they fall in love with Santa Fe. And you think, okay, I'm going to build a real long-term relationship and a collection with them. But basically, they're just enjoying being in Santa Fe at the moment.
Got Bob Kapoun here today. Thank you for breaking away during Indian Market Weekend at the Rainbow Man. Now, let me just tell you, that's a big deal to do that.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and this will be fun. People don't wake up till a little later, so this is good for me to sneak out and find out what you're going to find out about me here.
Yeah. When do you go to work usually?
We're always there at 9, 9 to 5:30, but we stay till, as you know, much later.
Yeah, people don't realize how hard it is this time of year.
We work the whole month of August. It's just 7 days a week. It's just too important.
Yeah.
It's our busiest. It's the best. And so we're there, and then we get the heck out Labor Day.
Yeah, is it like really, I mean, for me, it was probably 60% of my business was made in August. I don't know if it's that much for you or not.
You know, we've been there at the Rainbow Man since 1983. And so 36 years later, we started out originally that August has always been the best month. July was the second best month, and then October was our third best month. Then we had this crazy time with Thanksgiving. You could make a week, and then Christmas, you know, the week between Christmas and New Year's was great, and then you had spring break. So we basically had 4 months that were really good, and the rest was just catch what catch can. I mean, it's just really that uncertain. But over the years now, we've got where July, which was our second best month, is now our third best. So we've got August, October, and then July. So it's changed somewhat,
but still really a kind of a 4 or 5 month. Yeah.
But it'll never change.
Yeah. Well, if it does, we'll be gone. And that's 36 years now?
It's 36 years.
And that's and just for people who haven't ever been to the Rainbow Man, it's right off the plaza. You can't miss it. And I'm going to talk to you about that. But first, I want to find out how you got there. So where did you grow up, Bob? I don't know. I mean, we've known each other for a very long time.
Yes,
but I don't know where you grew up.
Okay, so I'm from Brookfield, Illinois, which is very famous because there's a zoo there, the Brookfield Zoo. It's actually the Chicago Zoological Society that runs it. But Brookfield is a blue-collar working town. It's a suburb of southwest suburb of Chicago. And upon high school, this is now 1966, classic time in all of our lives. Went on to Southern Illinois University.
Oh, we're not going to let you go that fast, baby. We're going to back that thing way up. What'd your dad do?
My dad was a truck driver. He was a Teamster. You know, he provided a good shelter and home, but the poor guy slept, you know, as soon as he got home and got up at 4 in the morning. It was a tough life for him.
So he'd make long haul truck drive?
Well, he started out with delivering fuel oil, and during the winter, it was pulling out a long hose and going to someone's house. And he eventually got to the point where he delivered gas to gas stations. So, but that was still in the inner city of Chicago, so it was hard for him.
Was it hard on you?
Well, you know, the hardest thing for me was my mother, unfortunately. This is psychoanalysis time, but my mother had severe migraine headaches when we were growing up, and the house had to be dark. Basically, couldn't have friends over.
Wow.
Come to find out that she had an inner ear infection. Actually, it was a tumor. And once they removed that tumor, the pain went away and she became a whole different woman. And it was fortunate that I only had about 6 years of those good years. And then I went off to college.
So when did they discover that, finally come to that conclusion? How old were you?
Well, I was just out of high school going into college.
Yeah, so As a kid, though, you didn't have any of that. You had a mother who was no kids, nobody allowed, lights off, and was in pain, basically, right?
In pain.
Isn't it amazing that she could even do that in that?
But she loved the Chicago Cubs, and so my grammar school was just a couple blocks away, and I could dash home and see the last couple innings of a game because the WGN in Chicago always broadcast the Cubs games. So we had and she loved music, classical music. She played a lot of music, and no, there are wonderful things about that. She was Australian. My dad met her during World War II. He was stationed in Australia.
What did he do? What was he doing?
He was in engineers. He was actually in the service before Pearl Harbor, so he was one of the first to be shipped out. And as the Japanese kept going further in their conquering, Australia was going to be the last stronghold, and so he wound up in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm going to fast forward. I was fortunate when I was in Vietnam. I took an R&R and went to Australia and met my mother's side of the family, my grandmother and aunts.
That must have been interesting.
It was totally bizarre. Two different wars bringing the Kapouns to Australia.
What is Kapoun, by the way? Is that?
It's Czech. It's actually Kapoun, but Kapoun.
I always wanted to ask that question. See,
Kapoun
just that.
when you're in Chicago, it becomes
Chicago.
easy. Yeah, but the interesting thing was I lost my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt, who I'd met in Australia. All of them within 18 months after I got out of the service. So I felt blessed that I was able to see them and get to know them before they passed on. My mother had, unfortunately, lung cancer. She smoked a lot because of her pain. So too much. And I lost her. She was 47, so it was pretty tough.
And when you're growing up as a kid, so she plays music, so you have the arts around you. Did you have any interest in art at that point? Were you collecting anything, or were you a pack rat to collect?
I wish to say I was, because I certainly am now. But back then it was classic baseball cards.
But you collected those.
I collected those, and hated the Yankees and used them as clappers on my on my bike. Now all those great Hall of Famers, and those cards are worth hundreds.
Did you keep any of those?
Like every kid, you had them in a shoebox, and then somewhere along the way they're gone.
Yeah.
So be it.
And were you exposed to any of the art museums? Did you go to any art museums and that kind of thing?
Being close to Chicago and the great joy, Brookfield was right next to the Chicago. Burlington, so we could hop on the train and go right to Chicago. And we went to the art museum often, the Field Museum, and the Museum of Science and Industry, the Shed Aquarium. Chicago had great opportunities to just get out and enjoy, and I did take advantage of that. I also became fascinated with cinema, and I have a degree in cinema and still photography. So there was a movie theater that used to be a burlesque show. It was called The World, and we would go down even Friday nights where most guys were out there partying. We would go down with friends to see foreign movies at The World. So it was something that I saw Fellini and all these early great directors and movies.
And you're like a teenager, kind of?
Teenager, still in high school. Yeah.
And were you at that point? Were you thinking maybe this is something for me as a career?
Well, it got to be strange because ultimately, when I graduated from high school and I went down to Southern Illinois University, I was studying forestry because I had seen Jeffrey Hunter in a movie called The Smoke Jumpers. And I was fascinated with the concept of dropping into a fire by parachute.
So the movie, which you really are interested in, all the movies, influenced you, and you go, okay, maybe I want to be a forest ranger?
Wanted to be a forest ranger, stayed in school for 2 years there. I lost interest as everything at 1968 was turmoil.
Yeah, 66,
uncertainty.
You graduated, right?
Graduated in 66.
And so when you told your folks, your mom and dad, you said you're going to go and study forestry, they're probably okay with that?
Oh, yeah. No, they were happy. I was the first to graduate from college and college in my family. So, they were quite proud of that opportunity. But again, with the great uncertainty of life and where I was going to go, what to do, forestry just didn't turn me on. Dendrology, learning, all about, a tree, and just didn't work. That illusion was shattered. Had a very low draft number. And
what was your number?
88.
Oh, that's really, so tell me about that. So where were you when they picked that number? Were you at your house, or were you friends?
It was, I wish I could remember exactly, but I had to have been home, and it may have been televised. I don't know.
It was.
But,
I remember. So was that 66 for you?
66, yeah. So they won on 66. I think they went all the way up to 300 and something.
Oh, yeah, no.
It was pretty high. So I had a low number.
What was that like, though? When that happened, when you pulled it, you knew you were going to Nam, right?
Well, Vietnam still in 66 was still in its infancy as far as what was going to happen ultimately. So 2 West deferment was safe, but I knew as soon as I lost it, I was going to be drafted. I pushed my draft up just to get it over with, because it was a classic time where if I had had more maturity, I would have hoped to have said, I'm not going. I would have fought it. I would have gone with all the movement that was going on then. But the military, believe it or not, was what really kind of gelled my life, my voice, as I call it, my personality. I knew I never wanted to be told what to do like I was in the military.
Right.
I went, I was, my testing for the military proved that I was officer candidate, potential, and so ultimately I just rather would have, I wanted to just get it over with, but I did go to jump school, so I did get to finally jump out of an airplane. But
what was that like the first time you jumped out of an airplane?
Scary as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, and also one of the most exhilarating feelings in the world. Interestingly enough, I was fascinated with the world spinning underneath my feet, which are stationary because you become the wind, and I literally passed out. And when I woke up, I had 2 guys over my head looking at me saying, what day is it? What's your name?
Right.
And I was afraid I was going to get washed out. And they said, hey, if you're really feeling it, we should get you to the hospital. I said, no, I'm okay. So
Did you do it again?
Oh yeah, I had to get back up the very next afternoon.
Yeah.
And
did you pass out on that one, or
no,
that was easier?
No, that one was. They were never easy because those were the old chutes where it's not like
Static chute?
Yeah, and so you hit hard all the time. Yeah. And anyway, they sent me to Vietnam, and I was in communication. And
was this as an enlisted or an officer?
No, I didn't pursue
you
officer because I just knew I wasn't going to want to stay, be part of that.
Yeah.
But so
Probably
I was a grunt.
And what branch were you in?
I was in the Army, and I was in a headquarters company in Vietnam, and I was a radio relay operator. So I had a really fascinating job. They sent me off in a helicopter to a landing zone, which was there were only 5 105 howitzers that were run by the South Vietnamese artillery. And myself and one other American were on top of this hill, and then we would send Reaper teams in, which were reconnaissance teams down below, and they would be out for several days, and we'd have the only communication with them, and I would communicate back to headquarters company.
So you're hearing it in real time, what's going on?
I had, it was hairy situations. These guys would set up at night and put their perimeter, set up their perimeter claymore mines, and a lot of times they had to get extracted, and they ultimately gave me a Bronze Star for my efforts one time, which was these guys. If you ever saw the movie Apocalypse Now, or any of the others, you know that these guys were heavy duty. And when I got back to base camp, they just partied unbelievably. Everything that we did back then, drink, smoke, and then the next thing you know, they're back on the helicopter doing it again. And it was an amazing time.
So you'd be out there on that hill
for a week.
And you're out in the jungle, really, basically.
Which was great because I got to eat and be part of with the Arvin people, the South Vietnamese, and they were just like me. They were basically drafted and young guys, but It was great.
But the potential was there to get fired
yeah,
upon at any
we
given
did
time.
often. You know, there was mortar. We were mortared often, but and you know, it was just it's just something you did. But the sound of a Huey helicopter now is still something that I hear it, and it brings me right back to Vietnam.
And is that like a gut shot to your stomach when you hear it, kind of thing?
It's actually, for me, it was comforting, because when you heard it, you knew you were getting
Safety.
out. Yeah. But as soon as we got on the helicopter, we sat on our helmet, just because we felt we were safer than a bullet coming straight up.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't want to get shot in the butt or other places.
Exactly.
And so you did that for 2 years?
Yeah. So in the whole year of 1970, I was in Vietnam, but I was in training, jump school, when Woodstock came about. I mean, here we are, the same time period, 50 years later. And so the world was changing, you know, that's what it was to us, the world. And when we got out, we couldn't wait to get back to the world. We didn't want to recognize, and people didn't want to know we were vets. It was a tough time to try to
Did you find
feel
animosity that when you would come back? Because you had short hair, for one thing.
Short hair, but you immediately let it grow, and you just there was no bonding with other vets, because you just wanted to just meld back in. Yeah. And there's so many walking wounded. I think I'm still in some level of walking wounded from that, just psychologically. It's you forget a lot of the things that happened, and but I was blessed. Don't get me wrong. There's people that had a whole lot worse, and unfortunately we lost far too many.
Yeah. And so you come back, you're out of the military in 70?
Yeah, and so I became fascinated with photography when I was in Vietnam. I bought a camera at the PX, and I started taking photographs.
Did you take photos while you were out there?
Mm-hmm.
And you have those still?
Yeah, I have some great photos. You know, again, it's an interesting thing. When you're, my platoon, as soon as you got there, there was a guy that was going home. So you were long when you got there, and you were short, you know, you were just counting down the days. So there was no real strength of friendships that were maintained. So I do not communicate with any of my fellow GIs, but I took a lot of photographs of them and still have them.
And is that what was mainly? Were you taking portraits, or were you?
Portraits, and then when I took R&Rs, I just just like anything, it was a camera. It was fun, and I just took many photographs, and a lot of them not very good, but I developed a sense of aesthetics, and I felt, you know, this is something I want to pursue. So I went to college.
Did you develop those out there? I just want to
know. No.
So did you have all these rolls of undeveloped?
Yeah, and they were mostly slides, which was something you know, I wish I'd not done, but that's how we did it. We just send in the roll, and we get our slides back. But I went to a community college and met my photography instructor, who was the reason why, he and his family, why I'm in Santa Fe, because it was Ross Llewellyn, who had a jewelry store here in town, and his wife, Arlene, ultimately had one of the great galleries, and still is, called Llewellyn Gallery here in town.
That's a very interesting that you happened to meet. And where was this? What community college?
I went back to Southern Illinois University and got a degree in cinema and still photography, and then Ross and Arlene were moving to Santa Fe. She got a job at the prep school as an art instructor, and he wanted to do his jewelry. And so in the summer of 74, that was my summer of 69, I was a free bird and had great time coming west. Came to Santa Fe, knew this is what I wanted. Basically, have never gone back. So I owe a lot to the Llewellyn family. I met my wife, Mary Ann, here, and we have 5 children. We have
you're jumping over a lot of time frame.
18 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren. So we've got a gigantic family, and they all live here in town.
So did the Llewellyns come first, and you followed them out?
No, we all came together. They were moving that summer, and so
and they said, "Hey, come
along."
And so let's see, that was
74.
74. So you're like 26.
You got it.
Yeah, 26 years old. And did you have and so you have a degree in
cinema and still photography.
And what did you think you were going to do with that?
Well, I was fearful that up until coming west with the Llewellyns that I'd have to go to Chicago and take wedding photographs or be a commercial photographer,
Right.
which scared me because I just
Should.
didn't. I was a street photographer and I loved photographing people, so I was spared that potential because I could have been still lockstepped into something in Chicago, but
And so you think it was that meeting with those people
absolutely.
that they just go, you got to come with us?
Yes, Ross Llewellyn was somewhat of a free spirit, and he just created it within you a sense of your own strength and vision, and I just followed it.
Uh-huh. And so you get here in Santa Fe, and that's
74.
74. Okay.
Fall of 74.
And so what do you do? What do you,
Well,
because you got to make a living.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I did what's known as the Santa Fe Shuffle. I did anything and everything to make it work. I had, throughout my high school years and college years, worked in grocery stores and in produce departments. And so I worked here at the Albertsons. I also worked construction with a great guy, Jerry West, here in town, who's famous as an artist within his own right.
Yeah, I've seen it. I like his paintings.
Yeah, no, and so I fell into a real community of artists and felt comfortable. And
This is like the first time you've met Native Americans, probably.
well,
Right.
the first thing I saw in New Mexico was Santo Domingo. It was one of their chicken pools, which unfortunately you can't see now because of the people feeling like it's cruel. But at that time, when I met Angie Riano and her family, and
The jeweler.
and they're still, but yes,
Yeah.
Angie Riano, the jeweler, and still have great friendships. We were there till 9:00, August 4th, feast day at their house in the rain. It was a great experience.
Just now.
Just
Yeah.
now,
50
yeah.
years ago, or whatever
Exactly.
it was, 48.
So very close.
And so when you go out to Santo Domingo the first time, did that change everything for you? Or
Well,
what was
here
that
I
like?
am from the Midwest,
Right.
and the chicken pool was such that you had lines of horsemen and two guys line up, one on either side of each other on horseback, and bring out a chicken, and then they try to grab and pull for the chicken, and then whoever gets the chicken dashes over with their other friends on horseback and throw the chicken into the crowd. I mean, this was pretty amazing stuff. I
right.
said, this is not the Midwest.
You probably, did they allow you to take photos back then?
No, I took no photos,
Yeah.
and there are no photos.
Yeah, that's well.
No,
As
this
well
was
it should
all
be.
just
Yeah.
just unbelievable experience.
And did you start to think about native arts because you meet a great jeweler? Is that when that kind of popped for you?
I because I had a degree in still photography, I had to learn the history of photography, and so I became aware of how it's a living history out here, and going out to the pueblos, especially Santo Domingo, and seeing dances they've done for centuries. I became fascinated with trying to find old vintage photographs of the Native American people. And when I met my wife, Marianne, I pursued that, and Marianne was the one that actually created our ability, or our store that we have now through her own history. She worked with Oscar Branson, who was famous. You know him from from Tucson. And Oscar had his store, The Treasure Chest, and when Ray Dewey and John Coffrin bought the Treasure Chest and became Dewey Coffrin Gallery, she was the only one they kept. And then Marianne had an opportunity to work for Catherine Katona, who had the Kiva on the plaza as a director. And I saw an ad in the Santa Fean. Mrs. Windus, who owned the shop of the Rainbow Man, wanted to sell her shop, so we called her, and she said, "Honey, get over here now." She said, I just would love to sell the store to you and Marianne because you remind me so much of Hal and I. And she said, "But I've got someone coming in from Fort Worth, and I'd really..." So we went over, and she said, "If you really like it," she said, "can you write a check? I'll never cash it, but I wrote a check for $500, and she honored that, and one thing led to another, and we are still there now.
Yeah, so she owned the building?
No,
Or
it's
she-
still that our building, all the way through, including the Shed Restaurant, is in a trust. It's the Field Trust that Martha Field, excuse me. And so we've rented, and
So she was just selling your business?
she was just selling her business.
And she
the
sold it for
lease.
$500?
No.
Okay. I
She
didn't-
wanted $500 down.
Okay, what would it cost if you want to share that at that point? Because this is a long time ago, right? This is 70,
we paid $120,000
Yeah.
for her business, and so when I met the executor of the estate that owned all of the trust that owned all the buildings, I asked him if I could possibly buy the building, and he came up to me and says, "Sure." It was Bill Fields. Unfortunately, he just passed away last year. And I said, "Okay, Bill, what would it cost?" And he says, "Well, it's going to cost. It's worth $1 million, but we want $2 million." And I said, "How am I ever going to be able to get lend money, a bank to lend me money for $2 million that's just been appraised for $1 million?" He says, "Well, Bob, we really don't want to sell. There's 25 people getting big checks every month from all of these properties." So.
Right.
Now, almost $4 million later in rent. I wish we'd had that opportunity, but
Well, you did have the opportunity, you just didn't have...
we had the opportunity. Didn't have any way of making it
Yeah,
real.
and that was the right call anyway. Who wants to pay a double on something? You can't see. How old are you when you opened this?
Well, that was only 74. That would have been 32.
So you were 32 when you went into the Indian art business. And at that time, what were you selling? Was it?
Well, I was actually buying and selling vintage photographs,
So
and
you were
Ray
doing
Dewey
all
was
that.
allowing me the opportunity to sell through the Dewey galleries on the walls there, vintage photographs. And I became fascinated with Edward Curtis only in the sense that there was no other photographer that photographed so many different tribes of the American Indians. So it was getting hard then to try to find great old photographs. A lot of the museums weren't buying. It's just things kind of dried up. But I just came to realize that if I was going to stay and wanting to collect and sell vintage photography, the American Indian, Edward Curtis was the guy that I should pursue. No one knew anything about Curtis and what these things were in terms of all of the different photogravures and different papers, and then master prints and these unique gold tones.
Right. Was this kind of mid-70s?
Yeah. Well, it was actually 1983 when we bought the Rainbow Man, and I really pursued it in a serious level as far as...
And Curtis you immediately fell into.
Loved it, knew the Curtis gold tones were the thing I wanted to really specialize in. I've bought and sold more of those than any other dealer. In Santa Fe, you get great opportunities. Ralph Lauren came in one time and bought 5 or 6 gold tones from me in one time. I've recently sold 5 to Bill Ford, CEO of Ford Motor Company. Jerry Bruckheimer bought a series of them. And it's interesting. These people come to Santa Fe, they fall in love with Santa Fe, and you think, okay, I'm going to build a real long-term relationship and a collection with them. But basically, they're just enjoying being in Santa Fe at the moment.
Right.
And
Rockefeller did the same thing in 28.
Who did?
Rockefeller came out, went, saw Cass, saw Sharp, bought a bunch of stuff, really loaded it up, and then really basically never came back.
Well, that's what I've had some serious long-term collectors that I've been able to, create a collection for. But no, it was by and large, this was something that was exciting at the time and put on the wall, but not something that they wanted to pursue on a real.
And would you be dealing with Andrew Smith too? Because he'd been around dealing in photography as well.
Andy and I are great friends.
I would assume you must be.
Oh yeah, we just we had lunch at the Shed the other day because he's living in Tucson now.
Oh, I know.
But
we're very happy to have him there. He's got a nice gallery open downtown, and he did a podcast.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I know. And so you guys had a relationship where you'd work together sometimes?
Oftentimes. I could not afford to buy a full set of Curtis North American Indian, and so we did collaborations with not only Andrew Smith, but Christopher Cardozo in Minneapolis, the Fleury Galleries in Seattle, Joshua Paylette down in New Orleans, all had interest in Curtis, and
Richard Lampert as well.
And Richard, and I didn't mean to
I'll make sure
Richard
he gets
out.
I'll make sure he gets here.
Mark and Richard. It was interesting because they had come down from Boulder, and they had found the plates in Boston. And,
Right.
well, they bought the plates. They didn't find them, but they ultimately tried to create classic gravure as a modern printing, which was unsuccessful on one level, but they did a great job and had a great sense of historic obligation to keep, as pure the imagery. So always didn't do as much with Mark and Richard as I did with Andy. And now, unfortunately, Mark passed away a number of years ago, but Richard and I have a very close relationship, and it's wonderful because he's up on Canyon Road and I'm downtown,
Right.
and we have totally different opportunities, different people coming in, and so it's been a great symbiotic relationship that I really cherish.
So that kind of fell into being one of your specialty areas, but it wasn't your only specialty area because you wrote a book about trade blankets.
That's true. Marianne and I became fascinated. Again, it's our connection with the Pueblos. You go out to any of the Pueblos at any time, even middle of summer or middle of winter, and a blanket is very important to how they present themselves to the world. Men will wear, when they're involved in their ceremonies, they will have a blanket that they wrap around them. The women will not go out of their house unless they have a shawl or something to properly, face the world, if you will. And so we became fascinated. We were selling contemporary Pendletons, but I started to look at the early works, and I had no idea what was what. Again, it was just dive in, and we'd go to shows and antique malls, and we were buying, blankets for very little,
Right.
and it became a passion. We had over 300 blankets at one time, and so I made a real serious study. In the book, Language of the Robe was actually a seminal documentation.
That was the first book on that, wasn't it?
It was. Barry Friedman's continued with that, but he kind of expanded his books to include camp blankets, which were primarily made for Eastern clientele. But I focused on the wool blankets that were made specifically for the Native American people. And of course, Pendleton is still creating blankets to the Native American people. So it's an ongoing tradition. But
And you brought that to the forefront, right? So you have people like Chihuly gets interested in that.
Well,
kind
Dale Chihuly was fascinating. We had a wonderful relationship together. He saw trade blankets as his inspiration for creating some of his first cylinders, his blanket
I
cylinders.
saw one of those very first blanket cylinders the other day in a guy's house.
Yeah, he would take glass rods and laying them out in a pattern that was similar to a trade blanket, and then create these incredible designs. And we traveled, did museum exhibitions together. We did one in Massachusetts at the Lowell Museum, and then we were out at the Gilcrease Museum. We did, it was the Gilcrease Museum.
So you would have the trade blankets and he would have his glass?
Right. We did the Idle George Museum. I did the Southwest Museum. When my book came out in 1992, it was just a fascinating time. We lectured and had exhibits, and
You probably couldn't keep up with trade blankets or the Pendletons, right? They were probably going out as fast as you could get them in.
well, again, Ralph Lauren was in the forefront of that, and he was using the designs for his, his towels and coats and whatever else he was designing. So it was an incredible wave that was going on. And then when my book came out, I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be just incredible. But it just, it was like a trough almost. The wave was, I guess, Ralph really took it into a fashion mode,
Right.
and people were, cutting up. Robert Redford came in, bought a great old blanket, and had it cut up into a coat for himself, and
Yeah.
so it kind of got to be a fashion thing more than a historic document, collectible, if you will.
And what do you think about that when somebody takes a great blanket? Again, these are commercial blankets that are made commercially.
Precisely.
But it gets repurposed. Does that bother you, or you go, well, that's what it's?
No, it's a living history. Thank God, like here in our pueblos, it's still a cradle to the grave concept. A child's given a blanket when they're born, and they have blankets given to them throughout their life ceremonially, and then
And these are
ultimately
Pendleton blankets, right? We're talking about, just so people know.
Well, I would like to think that the Pendleton is still what needs to be used, especially upon burial. But as you know, if you go under the portal today, you won't see as many Pendletons as you will see knockoffs that are from China or whatever. And that has to do with the cost factor. The Pendleton, the wool is expensive, and they keep going up in price. And so it's harder for Native Americans to be able to buy the Pendletons unless they can get an opportunity like us. We offer them at a cost plus 10% to any Indian that comes in Native American that wishes to have a blanket. So we still have a great relationship with Native American people that want the blankets.
Uh-huh.
So it's been exciting.
And so, do you still buy and sell the old ones?
Not as much. If there's a good one out there, I'd love to have it, but more than often than not, it's I've kind of phased that out. I've become fascinated with Chimayo blankets now, and seek out older Chimayo blankets, and so that's kind of been more of an exciting exploration now.
And have you thought about doing a book on that?
I'm involved in a book now on Cochiti storytellers, and I'm working with Charlotte Mittler, whose husband Tom Mittler has the greatest private collection of what are known as the clay people, the tall figurines, and she has a great collection. And so we have been working for a number of years to create that book, which is now we're ready for photography, and I've been doing all the research. So that book's out there. I thought I'd be doing a book on Curtis Goldtones at one point in time, but that's kind of faded a little. But I have been involved in two other books on Curtis. One was called Prayer to the Great Mystery, and the other one, which is still in print, and I can't even remember the name right now. But anyway, so I've done two books on Curtis, and books are something that I've loved to do, but I'm thinking now this will be the last one. This story.
And that great book, Short Nights of the Shadow Catchers,
fabulous.
which I think you were mentioned in as a thank you to. And that.
Well, that book has been a great stimulus to people's interest.
I highly encourage people to read that book.
Thank you for that, because he's a great writer, and no other author has put together Curtis's biography in such a dramatic sense, and the trials and tribulations of Curtis. Timothy Egan did a great job, and I'm very pleased that that's out there.
It changed the way I saw Curtis, by the way, when I read
like
that.
hearing that.
And it also made me feel like I haven't accomplished much in my life, because that guy would just work 12, 14 hours a day for almost an entire year, and he just never
everyone
stopped.
knows how you
No,
are.
I'm serious. When you compare something to like Curtis after reading Egan's book, it puts it in perspective. So that's one I think.
It was at a cost, like everything else.
Yeah, it was.
Ultimately, he was physically, financially, emotionally ruined. It took him years to try to, and he never did gain his full health back. He would have been considered a bad dad in today's world, because he was out there committed to doing his photography. His wife had to run the gallery and raise the kids. But when he died in 1952 at the age of 84, he's buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery. There's a grave that says "Our Beloved Father," that the kids did for him. So they talk in the book how it was exciting to be with Dad, because they would go out during the summer months when they weren't in school and meet with him when they could. So they all had rich, exciting lives through their dad.
Yeah, and he knew everybody. I mean, he knew Teddy Roosevelt.
It's an unbelievable
Morgan
history.
Yeah, J.P. Morgan, one of the richest men in the world, really.
And it's fascinating because
it.
Morgan cared nothing of the Native American. In essence, they were in his way of his business ventures. But he was a book person, and he wanted to and saw a way to create his own set of books. And so the North American Indian was, through the patronage of J.P. Morgan, a great financial disaster. 5 years that Morgan thought it would take turned into another 27 years. So it was unbelievable, but it never did achieve its success. Interestingly enough, and Egan points this out, in Curtis's book, he wanted to, or when Curtis had the idea of the North American Indian, he wanted to produce 20 volumes and 20 portfolios and limit to 100 sets at $5,000. And Morgan got so excited, he turned it into a set of 20 volumes, 20 portfolios, 500 sets at $3,000.
Right.
And now we basically feel that there's only 300 sets that were ever really printed.
And what would a complete set go for now?
Mint condition, there's one that's out on the market now for $3 million. That would be a record. The Crystal Bridges Museum purchased one a couple of years ago. The Amon Carter Museum had a incomplete set, and they sold the incomplete imagery and bought a full set. And those were all around $2 million. There was one great set that was on tissue that sold for $2.8 million. So if you ask me today, I'd say that we're still in that $2 million plus or minus.
Yeah, and these are rare. So if there's only 300, and most of them got broken up to be sold.
Well, actually, 85% of them are complete in institutions around both public and private. But
and they're never coming out, hopefully.
The problem is that for me is that I can't buy a set. And in the old days, we'd buy a set and we'd break it up and sell the volumes complete, either as a full set of 20 volumes or as individual volumes. Generally break up the portfolios because the large gravures were the ones where the money was. I mean, and Chief Joseph still is his most sought after. In fact, 40 years later, the same 5 images that were his most sought after are still the most sought after. And so...
and those 5 are?
Well, there's the image of Chief Joseph. There's the Kootenay duck hunter. There's Waiting in the Forest, Watching the Dancers. And is that 4?
That's 4. What about Geronimo?
Geronimo is not in the top 5, top 20 for sure. Canyon de Chelly is right up there as well.
Son of the Desert, maybe?
Sun is a fabulous image, especially as an original photograph and as a gold tone, extremely rare and one of my favorite images.
Yeah, I think it is my favorite. Actually.
It is spectacular.
So when you are going to put this book out on Cochiti items, it's mainly historic, or are you going to go all the way through contemporary?
Well, it's going to go. It's going to start with the collection of Tom Mittler, the early clay people. The Wheelwright Museum did a fabulous exhibition a number of years ago. These are figurines that were just totally unique to Cochiti. There were smaller figurines done at Zuni and other places, but the Cochitis really... just for whatever reason, it's quite still unknown why these became so fascinating in terms of creation for the Cochiti. So it'll have the clay people. There's a time period between so we're talking about 1880s to about 1910 with the figurine clay
and these
people.
are all these large opera singer pieces that are 2 to almost 3 feet tall.
Exactly. And then there's this time period when that phased out and applique, animals, lizards and things being applied to pots themselves kind of took over. And then in the 1940s, what was known as the singing mother, a single figurine with a baby in its arms.
Cordero kind of.
And then in the heyday with Helen Cordero making
64.
it and changed basically the whole Pueblo in terms of an opportunity for a lot of the potters to really have a source of income. There's such wonderful potters, and they've all passed away. Louis and Virginia Naranjo, Felicita Eustace, so many of them that there was 10 years ago when we had a desire to do this book, we realized that we needed to get this done while they were still alive and to honor them, and now almost all of them are gone.
And so you were able to get biographies and talk to them and interview them.
Yes, fortunately, Ada Sweeney is still alive,
Yep.
Mary Trujillo, but they're not potting anymore. The biggest scenario that came about was the lack of slip that they needed to apply towards their pots to get that wonderful creamy look that was so well known at both Santo Domingo and
for those who
Cochiti.
don't know, slip is this mineral, basically. They go out,
Bentonite.
yeah, bentonite. And so if you don't have your slip, or if you lose your cachet of where you get it, then you have to change the way you're potting.
And that's exactly what happened, because they used to get their slip over at Buttiger's, which was just past Santo Domingo on the way to Albuquerque. And they would literally dig it out, and it's still unclear exactly where or how, but apparently there was a cave-in of such that the Buttiger family thought there was a potential liability there. And so slip, it doesn't take much to create, but in the old days they'd use 8 to 10 applications of this slip to get this beautiful, creamy look that so famous. But now it's virtually kiln-fired commercial paint, commercial clay. It's a tradition that's almost gone.
And when do you think that book will be out?
Next year sometime.
That's fantastic.
We're excited.
You're gonna have
there's
a signing, I hope.
Well, it's this is the collection of Charlotte Mittler, and she lives here in Santa Fe part-time, and in Michigan the other. It's not something that we've signed up for, like the Idle George Museum, which she's on the board, that they would do a showing of her work. She's pretty much wants to keep this as a finished product, but not. I don't know exactly what will happen with her collection. It's kind of interesting, and she's not.
Yeah, but the book, you'll have signings.
Yes, of course.
In Rainbow Man and other places possibly.
Yes. Maybe down in Tucson at Medicine Man Gallery.
Yeah, come on down. I would love to do that. Yeah.
There you
Let
go.
me know. Yeah, so we inked Bob to come down and do that.
You got it.
And so now you've done the Rainbow Man for 36 years. And you've seen a few changes over that year. What's the biggest change, maybe just in Santa Fe, first of all? Because Santa Fe has changed a great deal, I think.
In truth, all things change, and life is nothing but change. But in Santa Fe specifically, as far as Native American arts, we unfortunately had an explosion about 10, 15, 12 years ago, actually, of an invasion, if you will, of a Gallup mentality of marketing American Indian, primarily jewelry, in such a way that it was stores were opening up and offering 50% off. Right. And it just, Santa Fe had always been spared that. So we've evolved where slowly a lot of those stores are going out of business. But there's very few really reliable stores, that, especially vintage. My wife specializes in the Rainbow Man in pawn jewelry. And so there's Shiprock that has great quality, and you can go up to the Wheelwright Case Trading Post, and Mark Botti has a great store of contemporary, and it's
Al Anthony gets some material.
Al Anthony's always been
Steve
a
Elmore will
classic.
have some things.
Morningstar Gallery, but at one time there were a lot more, and Dewey galleries were just incredibly
important. Gallery used to be there once.
Yes, and you were a contributor to that quality as well. So on that level, things have changed. It's actually made the Rainbow Man a much more attractive opportunity for people come in and say, "Oh, well, they're so happy to see us, that we're still here, and they love our store, and they can feel comfortable about buying."
Yeah,
quality.
well, you're knowledgeable. That's the key.
We sell history.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple.
Yeah, and so things have kind of gotten smaller, less notable dealers in this city. But what about the market itself? How have you seen that change?
Well, I think as you've probably had many people come on and talk about, we are losing a collector base. There's no question of that. As people age, collections are coming up. Atata just had a big seminar last January, where West Cowan Auctions House says, the deluge is upon us. That people are selling, dying.
Of course, makes for opportunity.
It does indeed, but it seems that you just have to be able to find better quality and pay a lot more for it, and hope to find a client and a customer who sees the beauty in that.
Do you see younger people? Because you're right there on the plaza, and you get more tourists than almost anybody.
Well, I can tell you this: I have 18 grandchildren, and they see when they come in the Rainbow Man, they see Curtis's work as dead Indians on the wall. So
They see it differently.
What can I say?
But do they wear the jewelry? Because my kids do.
I have a couple of our grandchildren that see the beauty in that and do have older jewelry. But as far as they're into collecting experiences, they'd rather go to San Francisco and stay at a nice hotel and go to and enjoy the experience of that. A lot of people come to Santa Fe, and again, they'll stay at a nice hotel. They'll go up to 10,000 waves, and so it's a little more difficult to find that collector. But as I said, last year Bill Ford came in, never bought a Curtis image. He loved the American Indian as a kid, and so they're out there. It's just it's a lot harder, and I think all of your collector dealer friends are probably saying the same thing.
Well, I think one of the things is, let's just think about you, right? You go to that Santo Domingo dance, and it changes the way you see things.
Yes.
And that's living, contemporary, breathing, Indians from that time frame. You make friends, and it's very important to you. I think if we all embrace this culture, living culture too, like Santo Domingo and Cochiti, maybe we can get these younger individuals to go, wait, this is not dead Indian material, like you said on the wall, but this is a living, breathing, vibrant culture that has a history that goes way back.
Yes, today's August 12th. Santa Clara has their feast day today. There'll be many, many tourists out there that will see that, and for the first time ever in their lives. I think it's probably, they have to leave with a memorable experience, and to what extent the seed is planted from that point on, yeah, it is a living history, and we just love being part of that.
Yeah, you still embrace it.
We do indeed.
Yeah. So I encourage people to go to the Rainbow Man and go visit him and his lovely wife. They have an amazing collection of vintage and contemporary. There's a wide variety, and they're both there usually working day in, day out.
We are there, and it's a family affair. We have our daughters and two daughters, and our oldest grandson works there. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Marianne specializes in the pawn jewelry, but we have folk art of the Navajo, and then we have Hispanic art as well, folk art, and then my Curtis, and then we have a whole courtyard that we've devoted for 40 years visiting Mexico and buying arts and crafts.
Yeah, it's a cool building too. Yeah,
and it's historic. It was the closest building to the Palace of the Governors. So back when Santa Fe was created, the Royal Guard were there. So it started out as a small room, was burned in 1680 and then rebuilt, and now it has the classic placita concept of every room has a door that goes out to the courtyard. And of course, the last final major historic event was in 1943. Robert Oppenheimer put together his list of scientists that he wished to come to Los Alamos, and then they came by train and stayed at the La Fonda Hotel, checked in at what is the back room of the Rainbow Man, and then were escorted up to Los Alamos. And it was only the scientists that came through our building. So 109 East Palace, we have a historic plaque. It became the Atomic Energy Commission from 1943 to 1963. So it's great history.
Yeah, and they were in that building from that time?
They were in that building.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's
See, that's
it's
why
incredible.
I do this podcast. I'm going to go see the plaque before I leave.
It's great history. It's beautiful, beautiful space.
All right. I'll let you go back to selling because I know you're probably dying to get out of here and go back.
I want to thank you for the opportunity. It's
And
been
when I
great,
shake
Mark.
Bob's hand, what I want to do for anybody who's watching on YouTube is look at this beautiful bracelet. This is how a dealer looks at things. That's how we do a handshake. Tell me about that bracelet before you go. That's an early, beautiful thing.
That is, thank you kindly. That's Navajo. It's sand cast. Dating is a little difficult, but with the natural stones, I can easily say 1900. It could be much earlier than that.
Yeah, it looks it.
But it's something that I traded in a whole bunch of other bracelets to just
To
keep
get
that
one.
one on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't think that one gets sold.
But this one I'll tell you about is a Zuni, and it's the Rainbow Man, and it's a very early piece.
Yes.
And it's symbolic of our store because the people that started our store, Hal and Gwen Windus, had been in medical services at Zuni during World War II. And when they opened the Rainbow Man, they created the name Shop of the Rainbow Man in honor of the Zunis. And in Zuni legend, the Rainbow Man is the great protector of the Zuni people. So, I've got my Rainbow Man on my left and my great Navajo on the right.
And you'll get more stories if you go visit Bob at his gallery and his lovely wife. Thanks again, Bob. All right, I'll let you get back to work.
Thank you, amigo.
All right, thanks. We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.